Hey everybody, thanks for checking out this week's episode of My First Sketch at myfirstsketch.com. I'm Josh Hyam. As always, feel free to subscribe to the show on iTunes or on SoundCloud and get it automatically. You can catch the show on the Stitcher app as well. Like the podcast on Facebook at facebook.com/myfirstsketch and email me at josh@myfirstsketch.com and follow me on Twitter at myfirstsketch. If you watch stuff on Hulu, they've released a documentary about the short-lived Dana Carvey show, which happens to be one of the only TV shows I was ever banned from watching from my parents. It's called Too Funny to Fail, and it's quite interesting with insights from the people involved, like Dana Carvey, Stephen Colbert, and Steve Carell. I recommend checking it out even if you've never seen a Dana Carvey show, which I believe is also available on Hulu. Today's guest on My First Sketch is Dave Metter, currently the host of What's My Line at Good Comedy Theater. His first sketch is called Soup Boots, and here is the audio from the actual video. And of course, the video is embedded over at myfirstsketch.com. So let's go to the sketch.
Just boots are boring and just soup is lame, but eating soup from a boot, it's amazing. Soup boots, eating soup from a boot. Soup boots, soup boots.
Soup boots. Eat the soup, then wear the boots. Not like that. Enjoy soup boots on the go, at the game, with a lover, at a party, in a waiting room, in a gazebo. Great for all ages too, and dishwasher safe. So whether winding down from a long day or out for the night with the gang, eating soup and wearing boots will never be the same. Soup boots, the first soup to come in a boot.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, thanks for letting me do this.
Yeah, no, thanks for doing this. So, Soup Boots.
Yeah.
What does this come from?
I really had no notion of doing sketch or even thinking of it as a sketch. Yeah, mostly creatively, what I had done before that was music, and so as it happens, I would just get a melody idea in my head. Clearly, probably what this came from was Footloose because it sounds rather melodically similar. And I had just this melody of soup boots, eating soup from a boot. I told my best buddy Matt. He told me it was really stupid and in a way that just pissed me off. And so I went over to my buddy Sam's house, and I just thought I'd record a jingle as just something fun to do. And so then this jingle was made, and I thought, well, why don't we try shooting it? And I got Nick Murphy.
From Continue?
Yeah, who I forget how I connected with him, and we shot it. And, it is not my proudest moment, but, it existed. I put it on YouTube.
You had mentioned that there's an award. You got something.
I got notified. Mainline Life magazine,
Okay.
a monthly magazine,
For
did their best of the main line, best of Philly.
Sure.
And they contrived a category best viral video or best online video, and Soup Boots won that. And so they invited us, Matt and I, because Matt helped produce it, to their best of the main line event, which included having a table, because all the other winners are basically businesses.
Right.
So it was we wanted to do it because what the hell. But basically we just had a table, a laptop showing Soup Boots on a loop, a soup boot, and just confused people walking up and be like, "Oh, what do you sell?" Well, nothing. It's a boot that has soup in it, and they'd be like, "Oh, okay." And that was,
I'm sorry. At this point, that scenario is funnier to me than the video.
It was
this
great.
idea of
And so then we also
this almost mixer of people.
Oh yeah, and
and you don't have a product to sell. You're just there's some funny stuff that we did today.
Best landscapers nearby, and someone handing out dumplings, and it's just this is a boot and that's soup. And and like we spray painted a boot gold and gave it to the editor-in-chief of the magazine who picked out the video.
Do you have any idea how they found it, or like
I mean, I'm sure we maybe contacted some little local media to try to just get attention. I think Matt might have emailed them, but for whatever reason the editor took a liking to it, and it got in that Mainline Life. And so I have like a certificate and all that. It was so dumb.
That's so fantastic.
And
I really
then
enjoy that.
And then I think also because Matt emailed NBC 10 at that time. This was in like 2010.
Yeah.
There used to be a segment on the 5 o'clock news called Your News, and it was hosted by a woman. She's no longer there. In which it would be like, it was like a 5-minute segment of like something pleasant happening locally, and we were invited to do a segment for this thing, and this is like, again, the first comedy sort of thing I ever had publicly done, and we go on, and I have Matt sitting with me, eating cold tomato soup out of a boot, and just like seriously, just spooning it into his mouth, and then also at the end of it, she had to take a spoonful of cold chowder or whatever out of a soup. And, she's asking, like, what's the goal here? And, like, and it's like, I don't know. And then this was when the whole fallout with Conan and Leno was going on.
Right.
And so she's just like, what would you like to do? And I said, really my interest is, like, half-hour comedy. But, and I had a split-second decision if I wanted to say what I was going to say. And I know it's just Philly's NBC affiliate, but it was still at NBC. They were nice enough to have me, but I was like, all right. And I said, I would love to get, a show on something like NBC because, it'd be cool to do a show for a few months and then get a few $1 million to leave. And in the back, because the studio's really small.
Yeah.
And, there's always that with a weather center. And you think it's just like some bullshit they make up as like a way. But no, literally, the meteorologist is back there.
Yeah.
Doing work. And I say the little dig about that, and Hurricane Schwartz gives out a hearty laugh. And then as I'm leaving, I'm thinking, everyone, basically all the on-air talent and everybody was just like so like into it. So that was ridiculous.
So you mentioned primarily being a music person, like bands. And,
yeah.
What do you play? What do you like?
I mean, I play guitar, and I mostly was into like songwriting. I mean, I perform occasionally, but that's not really my interest. I like writing, and but then the last 5-6 years, I've more so just been doing comedy stuff, and then like I'll mess around at home with music.
What's after Soup Boots? What's your next introduction to doing something comedy wise?
I forget if it was before or after, but then at some point Matt and I shot like a half-hour pilot I wrote that that didn't
does that exist anywhere, like other than your lab?
There were some technical issues with some footage, I think.
Oh.
And so it ultimately wasn't like complete.
Okay.
But other than that, I'd heard somebody I went to high school with, Molly Silverman.
Sure, yeah. Talk to her.
I had found out
she
was doing stuff at this thing called PHIT, and I was just like, oh. And when you know someone doing something, it makes you sort of think, well, then I can do that.
Yeah.
And so then I went to PHIT, and I started seeing a couple things, and at this time, like 2013, they did something called like Sweeps Week, I think it was called, in which it was like a tournament of shows, like a tournament style, and I submitted a show that was actually called Your News Philadelphia, which was a live fake local news show.
Okay.
And basically we perform it one night, and then there's another show on immediately after it, and then the audience voted who to eliminate. And we got to the finals, and against DTF, which still exists. And
okay, yeah, I do vaguely remember that, like the Sweeps Week.
Yeah.
Concept.
I always forget the People of Interest. Ryan Barlow's was in it. None of the others still exist. And I mean, I knew like, look, I it's nice that this got this far. There's no way we're going to beat Daryl. Daryl is, one of the co-hosts of DTF. You could just give Daryl a stage and a microphone for 2 hours and he'll keep you entertained.
Perfectly fine and
even in that finals,
enjoyable.
Timmery wasn't even able to be there. So like half the hosts weren't there and he still won.
It was just DF at that
Yeah. It was just down fucking. And then anyway, PHIT invited us and let me continue to do the show like every other month for a while. And I worked on that with Jackie Baker was the co-host.
Okay.
And
not a bad person to have as your co-host. Like,
no,
if you're going up against Daryl and Timmery.
Yeah, and Jackie was relatively new too, and it was more like I was like, I need a co-host. I'm gonna play like a surly, bitter anchor, and I need something to contrast that with. I want some a woman who can be like overly sweet and saccharine. And I saw her, and I was like, "Oh, she'll work."
Yep.
And we've since become like best buddies, and I assembled a little team of it was her, Matt Schmid, Sean Landis, Pete Rambo, and maybe that was it. And so they would help write.
Another good crew of
It was it was an impossible show to do because it was a fully scripted show that at first they expected us to do monthly. And of course at the time I'm like, yeah, we can do that. But then it became like every other month. And then eventually it went away for whatever reason.
Yeah, I imagine the turnaround of like having to rewrite and relearn and re-rehearse. And
there was always a tech element because I always like to do like at least 1 or 2 like video reports.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine how that work piles up and becomes daunting. And
yeah, so although I was like bothered when it ended, I was also a relief because it was unsustainable. And, it won a couple of the WIT outs. And so that was like my first real foray into doing Philly anything.
Okay. Were you more of a music person or like a comedy person? Like, were you like growing up? Like
growing up, I was a basketball player.
Okay.
Which I know everyone was some sort of athlete, but like, I used to go to basketball camps, and I was offered a partial scholarship to a prep school when I was like 13.
Okay.
But I eventually realized. I looked at my father and I thought
I was about to say, like, I don't want to be a jerk, but like, no. I'm assuming point guard or like Muggsy Bogues kind of.
And I was a real good shooter, but I also knew the limitations of how not only what my height will be, but my body type. It's like, Muggsy Bogues is 5'3", but he has a also different like shape than me.
Yeah.
I'm more of a potato. And and so, but I was always interested in comedy stuff. I know that in like 7th grade, we were given like an open-ended creative writing assignment, and I wrote a Seinfeld, and I wish I could find it, but it doesn't exist anymore. Remember that it was.
I wish it exists now too. Like,
I know. I mean, I'm sure it was like first of all, like 9
whenever anyone
pages.
says, "I wrote this in high school or middle school," I was like, "I want it. I want it now. Like, show me." Like,
and the only storyline I remember was. And it was based on something that happened when my mom and I went to Anthony Wayne Theater to see, for some reason, Maverick starring Mel Gibson.
Okay.
I started choking on a piece of popcorn. It was really not like a severe choking, but for the sake of drama, it was. And an old lady sitting in front of us turns around and offers me a Dum Dum lollipop. And I take it and I sort of like stick it and I dislodge it. And so
you fish it out with the Dum Dum?
Yeah, I mean, it was like
wrong pipe kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like.
And so I used that as some story element in the Seinfeld.
Okay.
Plus, it's a dum-dum.
Yeah.
But it was kind of funny.
I can see the Seinfeld there. Like.
And I'm in 7th grade. Come on, give me a break. And then, I didn't really start doing music till I was like 15, 16.
Mm-hmm. What else were you watching growing up? Like, I mean, you mentioned Seinfeld, so I'm assuming.
Well, certainly it was like Simpsons and Seinfeld. Mm-hmm. And, like between after school, between like either 4:30 or 5 and 8, between the local Fox affiliate, TBS, and like PHL 17, you could watch just either Simpsons and Seinfeld for those 2 or 3 hours, and that was big. Otherwise, like in terms of film, The Jerk is like my favorite by far. comedy film. And the other thing was, and this was like in terms of sketch to be germane to the point of this podcast, my Uncle Tim recorded off of HBO on VHS in like 1980 something, a special called I, Martin Short Goes Hollywood.
Okay.
And, because Martin Short's all like old Hollywood interested. And it's a bunch of sketches. There's like a through line, but about being either like an actor trying to get work or a direct, like stuff about Hollywood.
And I'm presuming because I don't think
he plays a lot of the characters.
He's in the characters. He does the makeup. Like he's in like a makeup kind of
thing.
Yeah.
And Christopher Guest is in it. Catherine O'Hara was in it.
That makes sense. I have to
I'm
find
sure
this.
It's great. And now you can I think you can find most of it on YouTube, but used to watch that constantly. And so like Martin Short has always been like I've been a big fan of.
I mentioned like I don't read a lot, but when I do, it's generally biographies. Have you read Martin Short's recent biography? Like
and it was really great. I mean,
I don't recommend reading that one on a plane. Because you know that story of like how people get like more emotional on planes, like they'll cry at movies and stuff.
Yeah, it was sad.
Full on bawling at the end of that book. Like
it's tough about
when his wife dies. Like I'm just like, oh no,
and how
greatest love ever's over. Like,
and I think was it Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn or something
Hollywood like that. Yeah,
couple like and some big scene of him landing at some like place where they vacation. Everyone's out with candles.
Like
and it's clear like, and from other stuff you hear and see and read, it's like. He seems like he's genuinely the nicest guy out there.
He's on that list of not jerks.
Yeah.
Like,
and that and I mean, Born Standing Up, Steve Martin's book is amazing.
So there's a period of pursuing music and as your time, like
I mean,
as your hobby, as your whatever you want to call it.
If I had the nerve, I wanted to go to like Berkeley for music, but for whatever reason, I thought that. Just getting a history degree would be more practical, which might as well just on the music school thing.
So in your writing song, are you trying to write comedic songs?
Never.
Like other outside of
almost never. I mean, I wrote the stupid jingle for Soup Boots.
Right. So that's like your first foray of like being silly almost.
And
like,
having some capacity to write music is useful because sometimes you need some sort of piece of music with some comedy thing you're doing. But no, by and large, I'm not a big fan of, I like musicals, but like musical comedy stuff.
Sure. Like,
I mean, like Weird Al's great.
Okay.
But like, there's very few things that I want to
like,
put on that
because
list.
there's a difference between, I think like Bo Burnham got into this a bit when he was just getting started. Nick Thune, I think. There's like, the guitar guy in the sketch up in stand up like
that usually I'm like ready to change the channel
like where like oh here's a funny song I wrote versus like or Demetri Martin how he just plays guitar to fill silence.
Yeah, that's like fine in a way because it's not like about that. It's just so. But yeah, no, like I don't need to hear another song about your tiny penis or whatever.
So that's never been like an interest of yours. Like hey, I'll get up and combine those two things at all. Like
no way.
Okay. Are you sure? Ugh. I can't talk you into it.
Nah.
All right. So you currently do like your big project now is What's My Line? As far as I far as I know, unless like there's something I'm missing.
I mean it's not much of a project.
I mean like that's how I know you from.
Yeah, that's the thing I do in public.
Yeah. What's the okay, I'll get back to it. Where do you go from Your News Philadelphia to What's My Line?
So Your News Philadelphia ended in the last one was January 2014.
Okay.
And it was so that was like the first month after PHIT opened at the Adrian. And it ended on difficult terms and but they were very welcoming of the idea. Like it just didn't work out. And, if you have a different idea and you want to do something, that's great. And so in like just April or May of that year, I started doing What's My Line because it was a show I always liked. It's a show I thought would translate very well.
Where are you introduced to What's My Line, like as a kid? Because
like it would re-air a lot on Game Show Network at like 11
so it is purely on Game
midnight,
Show Network stuff.
And my dad liked it, so we'd watch it sometimes.
And this is like the full-on 1950s.
Yeah.
I can't think of the host's name.
It was John Charles Daly.
Okay, because I know Betty White's on like a decent amount of them. Like
maybe later years,
like,
but it was really like the mainstays were Bennett Cerf, who founded Random House, Dorothy Kilgallen, who was a famous investigative reporter who died under really mysterious circumstances. She was the only person to get to interview, not Lee Harvey Oswald, the guy who shot Oswald, Jack Ruby, in jail. And all of her papers were gone after she died of a supposed overdose. Arlene Francis, who was an actress.
She's the one I can remember.
Yeah,
because like all their name, I can picture all their nameplates on the table being Miss Francis or like Mr. So and so.
Those three were around a lot, and then a lot of times her husband Martin Gable, who was like a producer or something, and Steve Allen would be on, who was awesome, and then sometimes like Groucho or whoever.
I remember like Tom Poston. I've seen episodes with like Tom Poston or like. Where I'm just like, wow, that guy was around that long ago. Like,
he was a funny dude.
Oh man, like because and you telling me that one was a publisher and one was a reporter, I was like, surprised me because I just assumed that they were all actors and actresses.
No, like because back then you didn't have to be physically attractive to be on TV.
Right.
They were able to just go with who's smart and like clever and quick enough.
Because on a show like that, I guess you kind of do want to have some kind of investigative aspect to it.
Like, Dorothy Kilgallen was incredible. There were episodes or rounds where it would start with her and she would just meticulously go and go and not get a single no answer and get it.
Okay. Wow. Like
it's amazing.
Yeah, because now I think the most recent What's My Line, because I think they've redone it in the last like 10, 15 years.
They tried it. I don't think it ever aired.
But it was like all comedian. Like it was all comedy or actors
probably.
Again. Like which.
I just thought I'm trying to do like a comedy show, and I'll just, worst case, if they're not great at the game element, it'll be funny and fun.
Yeah. When do you pitch this? When does it start?
I want to say May 2014.
Okay. Do you remember the first guest that you had? Like,
on the first show, I think one of them was, I had a guy who was like, my friend Dan, who owns a prom dress business, or at the time it was just prom dresses, but he looks like a dude who does Philly comedy. Okay. In other words, at the time maybe a slightly pot-bellied, bearded fellow who you wouldn't connect with prom dresses.
Sure.
My friend Jen, who owns a lingerie store, and I forget who else.
How do you find, you just mentioned that two of your first ones were friends.
Yeah, I shouldn't have used those up so quick.
But, how do you find people to do the show? How do you hunt down your guests?
There's a handful of ways. Typically, I'll think of a unusual sort of job or an interesting job, and I'll just think, beekeeper. I'll Google beekeeper Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. There'll be maybe 4 or 5 people that show up. I copy-paste an email to all of them, and hopefully one of them is interested.
So you're just cold calling
and
random jobs you think of.
Yeah, I'll read Philly.com, or if I have the Inquirer. There's a lot I get out of that. Those are the 2 biggest ways. And then sometimes I'll get something because someone recommends it. But those are the main ways. And yeah, it's just, cold call. And it's amazing how many people are just willing to take the time to do it.
Yeah, on one hand, it could be free advertising for your thing.
But for the most part, you shouldn't do it.
I don't know how
if you're not just gonna go in
successful it's going to be.
Yeah,
because what was it? I saw a couple months ago. You weren't there for whatever personal reason. Matt Schmidt was hosting, and one of the guests designed clutches.
Yeah.
And there's a part of me that thinks oh, that's a really random.
I got him because I think there was a Philly.com article because he had just made the clutch for Linda Carter for the Wonder Woman premiere.
But at the same time, I was thinking, none of us are going to buy a clutch from him.
And they're expensive.
That was the first thing I thought of was so this isn't advertising for him anymore because it's.
So sometimes people say no. Sometimes a lot of times people don't reply, but sometimes people will say no because I have stage fright or whatever. But no, someone like him, it was, that sounds fun.
Yeah, I think he had his full family there. He looked like he had a good time and enjoyed himself. So
I've never had somebody. I've had 120 guests, and
oh my gosh,
yeah, and never had a problem with anybody. You know, sometimes people cancel last minute. Sometimes the reasons seem spurious, but who knows? And, you know, nobody has been, like, annoyed with how it went or pissed at jokes the panel makes or anything. Because if you're going to agree to do that, you're pretty cool about it.
Is there a particular guest that has been, like, especially memorable for you? Or like,
I mean, having Dave Raymond, who was the original and creator of the Philly Fanatic.
Okay.
Because, I've lived in and around Philly my whole life. And, I mean, I don't think if we say the Fanatic's a person, Fanatic would be like the mayor if there was a vote. And he's the most like beloved between children and all ages.
Yeah.
And he created him, and he was him for like 30 years. And the panel also, they were down to so on the show you get 10 no answers, and after 10 no answers we reveal it to the panel what the job is. And the panel was down to 1 no, and they were flirting with the idea of a mascot. And Alex Perlman was on the panel, and he was like, could it be that the Sixers mascot, which at the time was Hip Hop, the bunny?
The rabbit.
They thankfully put down. And Perlman, or one of them was like, something like, no, that they suck. And I'm thinking, good thing I didn't book Hip Hop. And then someone's like, oh, what if it's the Fanatic? And Perlman says, there's no way Metter has that kind of pull. And I'm like, and those are one of those moments where I can just sort of turn, like, without making it clear to the panel, I just sort of look at the audience, and just by just moving my eyes to them, I get a big laugh because they know what the job is. And so they're like, is it the Fanatic? And I go, yes. And there's a picture, we still have it, of the panel jumps up. Kate Bamford was on it. Nikki Black. Perlman runs across the stage immediately, embraces Dave Raymond and picks him up. Tim Butterly jumps up, proceeds to run backstage of the green room of PHIT, run through the green room, back in through the other door, just like uproarious excitement, because that's the type of reaction people get from the Fanatic.
What else do you do comedy-wise? Like,
I've there's other stuff through the years. Like I was in like a sketch group for a minute.
with who? What's it called?
That was
How bad of an experience was it? Like,
the experience was fine. It was just short lived. It was called Iron Potato.
Okay.
Which was basically Helium had asked John McKeever, who had been in a group called Bird Text with Luke Cunningham and Tommy Pope.
Yeah.
And this was after Luke Cunningham left. At the time, he was writing for Jimmy Fallon's late night show before he got the Tonight Show.
12:30, yeah.
And so their group was sort of all over the place. Tommy was doing like national stand-up stuff. And so the owners of Helium were like, look, John, put together a sketch group. We'll fund the sketches and like the production, and we'll put them on our page. And like we'll take money from typical standard advertising, and we'll do that.
Sure.
So I had met John and forced on him like a half-hour spec I had written to just show him, like, hopefully make him think that I'm worth a damn. And he put together a group, and I was asked to come in, and we meet, and nobody knows who I am because at that point I hadn't done much in public, and it was me and John, Tim Butterly, Mary Radzinski, Aaron Nevins, and James Heskey, who were like a lot of the funniest people.
They're really funny stand-ups and stuff.
Yeah,
but
and
not necessarily.
Well, I realized
how
for
does
one
sketch
thing,
work with them versus
right, and I realized because John is, I think, the most well-rounded, talented comedy person in Philly because he can do literally everything. Mm-hmm. I think he realized I've got a lot of people that are supremely funny, but maybe they don't necessarily have much experience writing scripts. Mm-hmm. I met this guy who does, so I think I was brought in to just sort of help with.
Sure, absolutely.
That. But
because in that room you're going to get killer jokes and stuff. Like,
yeah, so as long as someone generates a premise, the punch-up process is going to be
has to become a story, or at least to an extent.
Like, yeah, like there was one premise somebody came up with, and I was thinking, oh man, I wish I could spend the next week working on it before our next meeting. And that person came in with what they wrote, and I'm thinking, they got good jokes, but it's and I was so confused, and I thought, oh, just as I would have no clue how to do stand-up, maybe they just don't at this point have a great sense of how to, pace and put together a sketch.
Now, did you do any of the classes at like PHIT or
No?
So this is all just. So where do you learn how to write a script?
Oh yeah. So I think at some point in college, because a lot of my music friends growing up were several years older than me and way more talented and way more hardworking, and I saw them really struggle. A friend of mine, he left this band he'd been in forever and finally took a deal as a solo artist with, at the time, was Mercury Records, which had just come back as an imprint of Def Jam, and Jay-Z was the CEO of Def Jam. And so my friend had all these lofty stories, and basically they screwed him over after a change at the top because the new guy wanted to put all the money they had towards, because a memo got leaked and it said, take all the budget allocated for my friend for Mariah Carey's next release. So my friend's debut album came out on a Tuesday. They dropped him that Friday.
Wow,
it was rough. And
but
it was smart, maybe business-wise, in terms of that Mariah album sold many millions.
Right. But you hear stories about that, like in the music business and in movies. Like,
right. So if this friend, my most like talented musician friend, was going to get screwed, anyway, I had like a stupid idea for a movie. I had no screenwriting experience. And so I decided to try to write a movie, which, I never probably fully finished the script, but I learned a lot. And so I've read books, and it was trial and error. And then
like you just reading like Robert McKee's story or whatever other screenwriting books you can
whatever
find.
you
Save
could find,
the Cat, whatever.
And it was just like trial and error, and then putting stuff up live and trial and error. And I've had a couple like mentor type people who I was able to send like a spec I'd write, and they'd give me notes, and I'd send it back and forth and go through 40 rewrites. And
you actually write. That's the part I haven't gotten to yet, is the rewriting. Like,
you can't write anything
I've
you do that.
I've written. Like, I've got first drafts of a couple different things, and I just can't like bring myself to go through it and like put in that extra effort of like.
Well, you have to.
I know. That's why nothing has gotten further than.
And then, but also it can be tough because it's like you only can see it in one way. So then there's the whole idea, well, take a step back from it for a couple weeks and then go with fresh eyes. But still, so getting an outside perspective helps. And then, like when I was writing this one spec, after maybe the 18th revision, me and the person helping me realized there was a fatal flaw in one of the storylines in the episode, and it was a Curb Your Enthusiasm. So one storyline deeply impacts how another one it gets weaved. So I basically, when you encounter that, it's like, talk about not wanting to go, but it's like you've invested so much time. And
so you're writing like spec scripts for TV shows. Like,
that's the only thing I really want to do. I love doing What's My Line, but being a game show host has never been the goal here.
Right.
If there is a goal, it's I want to write half-hour television comedy. It's basically like Seinfeld and The Simpsons. I feel like was the babysitter and huge influence, and that's, I feel like I might not be the funniest guy around, but I think I have some capacity for the process of writing, and I've written a few specs of shows that are very different from each other, and I think important thing is to be able to write in other people's voices. Yeah. Because anybody can write an original spec of their own, but how many people get their own deal to write a pilot?
You're
pilot?
definitely not doing that right away.
Right. And it's hard enough to even get like a job writing for a show, but most likely you're going to write for someone else's idea. And so the people told me, who were sort of giving me some advice, that you have to learn to do that. So that's what I try to do.
What's the most recent spec show you've done?
It ended, but I had written like a Workaholics, which is rather outside of my natural voice, but that's the point.
Yeah.
And right now I'm plotting out a Bob's Burgers.
Like everything I've ever read, I've read a couple of things saying that like pick a show first or second season. Like
I've done that.
Like
that can seriously backfire because you don't want to have a bunch of shows that are no longer on the air. So you have to sort of think. I did that. I wrote an episode of a show called Welcome to Sweden, which was a show Amy Poehler's brother.
Yeah.
And it had been picked up for another season, so I thought this is safe. They fully produced the season. They only aired maybe one episode, and they canceled it. So
I want to say they dumped it on iTunes or something. Like
They did dump it somewhere, but
they do that occasionally. Where they're like, all right, here's free episodes. Just
Right.
download them all and whatever.
so
like,
it renders that script sort of done.
but it's still.
But Bob's Burgers, I know for one thing, they're contracted for 2 more seasons, and then they just announced a movie to come out in 2020. So that's my goal. Yeah, the thing, if something's been around a while, it's harder to spec. I don't know if that is discouraging. And the other thing is, like, whatever the number one television comedy in terms of rating is, or like for a while it was like everyone was specking Modern Family.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to spec it because there's so many specs, and therefore people are reading a million of them.
Right, and I think that's part of the reason why you go for the newer shows. Like there was a point where
so then yours has to really
Raymond,
stand out.
You know, everyone was doing Raymond, Modern Family,
2.5 Men,
certain
probably.
people, Big Bang, I'm sure. Like,
but I feel like Bob's Burgers is maybe
it's still low
a little
enough
in between, and I had never. It's a type of show I'd never tried writing before, and it's a show I actually like.
Yeah.
And it feels safe because it's animated. Animated shows are able to go much
and
longer.
And you can do whatever you
because
need
they don't get constrained by the crazy costs of Matt LeBlanc wanting $1 million. Everybody on Friends.
That's
or
why
whatever.
Simpsons has been in space, and that's
Sure.
why like. What are you watching now that you're into?
I mean, Curb it is my
The
favorite.
new season holds up. Like,
I'm loving the season. South Park is on right now, and I'm really glad they're back to being episodic and not doing these, season long.
the full arcs, yeah.
That fully failed last season, and they admit it.
I think I watched like 2 episodes of last season. I was just like, you know what? I'm not
But whatever, those guys.
I'll be back later. Like, I'll see you guys next year.
Yeah, it didn't work. Nathan for You, I think, is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, other than that, like Bob's Burgers, there aren't a lot of like current shows.
Yeah,
that
I don't watch Bob's Burgers is like one of my few like appointment viewings now. Like,
yeah, it's not really necessarily so much an appointment, but it's
well,
like
I mean,
because
like,
I'm specking
when
it.
there's a new one coming up, I'm gonna watch it. I'm not gonna wait until like whenever.
So because I'm specking it, I'm making myself. I have to watch every episode. So I've got them all. I'm on in like season 3. There's like 120 episodes, but I can't. When you spec something, I don't want to repeat a storyline or establish that something like Bob gets big into tanning when it's been established that he hates tanning.
Yeah, you can't go crazy and change the Bible of the show.
Right.
Like,
So
you can't have Bob and Linda divorce.
That's another reason you don't want to write a show that's been around a while, because you have to sit down and watch.
You have to know the Bible of it. Yeah.
Right.
So the half-hour comedy, like, are you open to moving to LA to do it, or do you want to like start something here?
Of course. I mean, the odds of something happening here are slim to none. Abby Jacobson, who I like semi-knew growing up, she's from Philly, from Broad City.
Right.
But she wasn't.
Yeah.
She immediately went up to New York for college and stayed there. She's not like a Philly comedy person.
You're not going to be like, hey, I know you from so and so.
I mean, if I see her, I would love to talk to her.
Right, but like, you're not going to cold call and be like, here's a spec script, because that's kind of a jerk thing to do. I'm sure she's.
Yeah. Although, I mean, everybody tells you got to do that.
Yeah.
But and then like there's the Goldbergs, but things don't come from here.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, and they're not shooting here, so it's not even.
So the only way is you got to network. In networking here for that, seeking that isn't going to get you anywhere. So that, and I mean, my brother is out there. I've got some family, so I think about it a lot. But
I think Tom Lennon and Robert Grant from The State and when they wrote a book about writing for, I think it's called like Writing Movies for Fun and Profit.
Yeah.
And like the first chapter is like, you have to move to LA. Like you can't do this anywhere. And I was just like, oh, I don't.
Yeah, the only way
like
it seems like you could get in from not living in LA is if you're a stand-up, you can gain traction by like getting in festivals and then getting representation. If you hit something on the web, either a sketch that goes huge or you make a web series, then borders don't
Has
matter.
that been an option for you? Have you been thinking about a web series versus?
I've thought about it and I've had some false starts, but I can't really wrap my mind around trying to do like a series in which episodes are 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I never got too into sketch. I'm just not big on that format. I like being able to develop things more.
Okay. So all of the constraints of time that I'm worried about and why I like sketch is they're such a short thing, and like they're not as pithy and ephemeral and temporary as improv, but I'm also not devoting my entire year to a project. Like, there's a middle ground there where I can work on a couple sketches over a month. And
yeah, and I certainly watched a bunch of sketch growing up, but it was never like a lot of my friends who do sketch, they love sketch. And for whatever reason, it's not been something I found when I did it. I loved it. I mostly did it because you can actually produce it and put it up. And you can learn from it. But otherwise, it's especially like I'm just a really tough critic on everybody and myself. And, forget whatever percentage of sketches I end up thinking are good. But like the amount of sketches that have that somehow end in a way that's redeeming is really
it's the
few.
hardest part of sketch comedy for sure.
And it's just inherently hard. But it's just too frustrating for me.
That's fair. We missed out on it earlier. Who's your favorite Saturday Night Live cast member?
I mean, Phil Hartman was amazing. I think I'm a big Norm Macdonald fan. I thought his novel that he recently put out was
I haven't read that yet.
Oh, it's so great. I mean, it's funny in the way of
that's
Norm's
like the
voice.
fake memoir kind of thing.
But it's like legitimately a very good novel. And I watch his Norm Macdonald live on YouTube. He often says that he thinks Dana Carvey was the best SNL cast member ever. He got the most laughs. And the more I rewatch stuff, it's like, he was a pretty strong in terms of like the type of things you need to do to excel on that.
Right. Dana Carvey is a comedian that is built for that show.
Totally.
To the point where a lot of the things that he's done after the show are nowhere near the heights that he got on SNL.
But also, growing up, we had a VHS of the best of Gilda Radner, and a couple other people I forget, and we also had this. My brother and I had this CD-ROM of it was like SNL's 20th anniversary or something.
Okay, it was a CD-ROM.
It was a CD-ROM,
wow.
And it had however many sketches on it, the Jaws sketch and like Carvey doing chopping broccoli and whatever else,
which was his first episode.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And so I used to watch that a lot, and but yeah, those guys would be my favorite. And then I mean, in terms of Weekend Update, Norm is the best.
So with the process of writing, sitcom length projects and hosting a game show, dipping your toe in sketch a little bit at Helium, what's something you've learned about comedy, or that's something that comedy has even taught you about life that you could pass on
about life?
Yeah, we can go existential if you want to.
I didn't expect that. I thought you were just going to say something I've learned.
If you want to be just production wise versus existential.
Well, for one thing, between stuff in music I like and stuff in comedy I like, and I guess generally like creative artistic stuff, I'm a big fan of brevity and also like minimalism stuff. So like one of my favorite bands is Spoon, and they're very minimal. Although some of his work is totally not this. Kanye West, he's a big fan of like approaching things in a minimalist way and just really getting it down to the core elements. And which is why his album Yeezus is one of my favorites, because it might sound like there's a lot going on, but he just knows how to there might be only 4 or 5 things happening, but it just sounds so big and complete. And the same applies for whether it's a sketch or a scene or in an episode or a whole episode. The idea of you have to really go with the things that matter, no extraneous stuff. No matter how funny you think a little joke is, if it doesn't move a story forward, you have to kill your baby and get rid of it. And I mean, I don't really think this and apply it to life, but I'm sure there's a parallel that could be made about sticking to what's important or something. But otherwise it's with comedy and being active, a lot comes down to, having good friends and people you can collaborate with. I've been able to become good friends with Jackie and Matt, or being able to work with someone like I have Tim Butterly on What's My Line all the time, and he's the funniest dude I know, and it's a pleasure getting to mess around with people like that. And I assume that if they didn't like me at all as a person, or my instincts, or my the content I'm putting together, they wouldn't participate.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure I could be less of a dick, and I would be a lot better off if I wasn't as much of a dick. But you can always improve. And so I guess don't be a dick would be one. And but at the same time, fuck everybody if they don't like what you do. Because if you care too much about that, you're gonna shoot yourself in the foot.
And then why do you do this? Like, and I'm gonna be totally open here. Like, What's My Line came out, and I was kind of like, oh, he's just stealing
totally.
an idea. And then someone else that did another old game show at PHIT, and it was a one-off. It was a quick, something fell out, so they just got a group of people together just to do a quick show. And now I'm joking because at Black Friday Comedy, I'm doing a game show.
Oh, well.
So, yeah, so I've totally come around.
I think game shows are very underrated. I was talking to Alex Screwbart about it because he hosts Weeding Out the Stoned, and he's hosted other game shows. He's excellent at hosting these game shows. And, because ultimately, instead of just having a traditional show that is a panel show, you have a game going on.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason they're looked down upon, obviously I completely co-opted an existing thing, but I figured it's something most people of our age don't know exists. So it's just something novel. I was a history major. I like looking back to the past to learn stuff and find interesting stuff. And it was a show I like to watch with my dad, and so it has some sentimental value, but I don't even know if you asked a question or whatever.
It was, why do you do it?
Why do I do it? I do What's My Line because, I genuinely like it, and it's something that makes it so I'm definitely going to get on stage and do something every month and exercise that muscle. And I also get to play around with people I really enjoy and think are funny, and I get a chance to book comedians on the panel who maybe I've never worked with, or maybe I don't know very well, or maybe I've never even spoken to. But I'm able to invite them on, and if they're willing, I can connect with them, and that's fun in and of itself, and it's also, I'm sure, valuable for networking. But no, even though I don't put up much sketch anymore, I still write stuff. I don't know, it's just a compulsive thing.
Yeah. So you have to write,
I guess, and writing a half hour can be grueling.
That's why I don't do it. That's why I do sketch.
Right. So although I would love there to be an end game where I get a career out of it, I know the odds aren't always in anybody's favor. So clearly I just must enjoy doing it.
And are you so no career, if, worst case scenario, no career.
Yeah.
Are you fine with this being your hobby?
Sure.
There's a difficulty with hobby because I know certain people look down on the word hobby, but I feel like a lot of people treat their hobbies with way more reverence than they do their jobs and their occupations.
Well, if the option, so I just have to be realistic about what the options: career, ideal, hobby, which means I have a different career and I do this extracurricularly, or don't do it at all.
Right.
I'll take the hobby goal.
Right. The career ideal is that your hobby, the thing you do that you love, becomes what you get paid for, and your paycheck and your livelihood. But the stuff you still love it enough that it's your free time.
Because look, I've done 30 some What's My Lines, and I know that's not in and of itself going to advance me in any way. So I obviously do it because I enjoy it. So obviously most of it just comes from you like doing it. I'm on a podcast right now.
Yeah, it's just fun night with friends.
Why not?
Let's
and
hang out.
I don't, I'm not about to start exercising.
Thanks, Dave.
Sure.
Dave Metter will host the next What's My Line at Good Good Comedy on November 11th at 7 p.m. He told me a couple of the plans for the show, and it sounds like a fun one. Tickets are available at goodgoodcomedy.com. You can see me hosting Big Freakin Quiz during Black Friday Comedy Marathon, Saturday, November 25th at about 2:25 p.m. It's kind of a pub quiz looking back at the clogged toilet that has been 2017. My First Sketch is a Philly Sketchfest production. You can find out more information at phillysketchfest.com or on Twitter at PHLSketchfest. For more information about comedy in Philly in general, head to watercooler.com. The music on this episode is by the band No-No, which you can check out at nonoband.bandcamp.com. And you can like My First Sketch on Facebook. This is Josh Hyam. Thanks for listening. Go see some comedy.